There are absolutely zero games on the schedule for tonight, but there is big news for the Toronto Raptors. Scottie Barnes is questionable for tomorrow and will likely be back. And there's a lot on the line for Scottie. There's a lot on the line for the Toronto Raptors. There's a lot of numbers that we have to dig into about what direction the Raptors want to go into. And today I want to have a very nuanced discussion about all the factors at play and not just the simplistic, very overly dumbed down Raptors got to tank, Raptors got to be playoff team. There's a lot at stake here, and it's human beings. It's human beings you're dealing with. Whether you're talking about a human being like Scottie Barnes, whether you're talking about the human beings that are currently navigating their first NBA season, which is our very prized, very awesome Raptors rookie class, who are being widely overlooked by the NBA. I think there's a lot at stake here for the Toronto Raptors, especially if your goal is to catch teams like Cleveland, Orlando, OKC, the San Antonio Spurs, and ultimately all the teams that you're going to have to compete with if you ever want to bring another championship to the Toronto Raptors. So, what's at stake here? I think the best way to do this is to summarize this through the numbers, and the numbers are daunting. The Toronto Raptors are 7-20 right now. We know this. What's ahead? We may not always be so clear, but let's get super clear about it. Okay. So there are 18 games left between now and the trade deadline against the East. Ultimately, games against the East always count for a little bit more, especially when you're talking about games against teams that you are actively trying to catch. You have 6 games against the West. The Raptors had an absolutely brutal schedule to open the season, which was a lot of road games, a lot of Western Conference teams. They already got their West Coast road trip out of the way, and they performed abysmally at that. And they have 14 games remaining at home. For the remainder of the season, per Tankathon schedule, strength of schedule, they have the 7th easiest remaining schedule. I think it's worth noting that a lot of the teams that are in your range, including teams like Milwaukee, that you may eventually want to catch, although that seems like a complete pipe dream with the way they're playing right now, have easier schedules. So they will continue to pile up wins, and you will be the easy win on their schedule. So it's important to realize it's not a Raptors centric world. Not every single team is thinking as the Raptors. And when most teams look at the Raptors on the schedule, they feel about the Raptors probably the way we feel about the Charlotte Hornets. Okay. So it's worth noting that you have 4 games remaining against Washington for the rest of the season, 4 games against the Jazz and Blazers, who are bottom feeders and are absolutely tanking, 2 games against the Hornets, who have pretty much just given up on basketball, and 3 games left against Philly, which is a really wild card given, what's happened with Jared McCain. But, you have Nick Nurse coaching. You have Joel Embiid rumored to be, nearing a comeback. And so, do they have enough? Do the Raptors have anything, in terms of an answer for Joel Embiid? I don't think those are 3 easy wins at all, but those are the easiest games per strength of schedule Tankathon. So Scottie Barnes coming back alone is not going to swing the team into playoffs, but they have a serious ground to make up and would have to basically play like a 550 team from here on out to be even close. So what does swing the balance is not just Scottie, it's Scottie and Quickly. Kelly getting healthy. He has notably been, a little bit worse for the wear this year so far through 4 games. He is shooting the worst true shooting that I've seen in a really long time, but he's been okay defensively. But in the scheme, he's performing pretty miserably defensively. It's a complicated thing with Kelly, but I think he can play much better. Bruce Brown, contract year, Bruce Brown is going to be probably something to behold for the Toronto Raptors. Okay. And Jakob Poeltl just missing a couple of games, right? Because he's currently listed day to day. He's out for tomorrow against the Nets, but he could be back for the back-to-back against Houston and New York. So their next set of games, Brooklyn, that's the win. To me, that's the win. That's the one you got to get. You got to get that one, right? With the way Brooklyn is, sort of falling apart right now. They just got blown out by the Cleveland Cavaliers. I think you got to get that game. Then you got Houston, New York, Memphis, Atlanta, Boston, Brooklyn again. Okay. And at that point, Brooklyn has probably traded Cam Johnson and they are complete tank mode. Orlando, Milwaukee, New York, Cleveland, Detroit, Golden State, Boston, Milwaukee, Orlando, Atlanta. So throughout that 18-game stretch, which is leading up to the 2 weeks to the trade deadline, if you generously factor in 5 wins through that stretch, that's 5-13, which sums up to 12-33 for the math people in the back. How good does Toronto have to be to not pull the plug at the 45-game mark? Honestly, I think this question is up for debate because at 12-33, most teams pulled the plug. So do the Raptors have to be 15-30? I think that might be it. I think that's the miracle number or the golden number, which means if you're looking at this next set of 18 games, you got to go 8-10. That's your, in my opinion, that's your golden, number. 8 yeah, 8 wins, 8-10. So that's what you got to do. Okay. And so the question then becomes, is that even possible? Right? You got to get some wins you're not supposed to get. And I'm hearing a lot from the Toronto Raptors faithful that no. Look at Cooper Flagg. Look at Ace Bailey. Look at Dylan Harper. Look at, Jaeger Demon's falling off a little bit. But look at these guys. And I'm with you. I'm with you on that. I hear you. But how do you approach the locker room and say that? Right? How do you? So this shit ain't happening. I'm gonna say that right now. This ain't happening. 18-30 with that stretch, no, my friend, you're gonna be pretty bad. You're not gonna. I think I would put money on that one. I don't think that's happening. But the more nuanced discussion to be had is, to what avail? What's the point, right? You want meaningful playoff experience if you can get it. If you can take this roster, which includes 5 rookies and 60, I want to say 64 to 68% of the minutes being played currently on this team are by guys under 24. If you can get playoff reps for them, that is valuable. It is valuable in terms of asset management. It is valuable in terms of what you, see, that's the discussion, I'm trying not to have right now, but I hear you. And I'm not against it. I'm just trying to tell you that the more nuanced discussion to be had here is there is a plus here, but the plus comes in context. And the context here is, who are you slated to go up against in the play-in tournament? You certainly do not want a repeat of 2023 going up against Chicago and getting beaten by a little girl. You don't want that, because that was embarrassing. And that certainly did not help the Toronto Raptors. Just, as much as I love Grady, damn, Derek Lively and Cason Wallace so far through their career have been significantly better. Will Grady catch them? Possibly, probably. I don't know. But these are discussions that, narrowly missing out on a future franchise cornerstone and missing them by 2 picks could be the difference between trying to aim for the play-in or tearing it down. Now, the Raptors will certainly have a very difficult time in the last month of the season tearing it down. Washington was like, how you tear down beyond Washington is beyond me. You'd have to basically play Jamal Shed, by himself. You'd play Jamal Shed and Davion Mitchell 42 minutes a night and probably still not lose to the Washington Wizards in April. So the question isn't, what are those teams doing? Because I have no doubt in my mind that Chicago is close to tearing it down. I know they historically haven't, and they've kind of shown a willingness to kind of compete, but I think they have a lot to gain from that. I mean, being in the middle does not appeal to anybody in a really great draft. I think Charlotte and Brooklyn, it's a foregone conclusion. Washington's already there. So now the question becomes Philly. Now, the question for the Raptors is, I don't know what Jared McCain's injury looks like. I don't necessarily even think he's the most consequential player. But what if Philly is your matchup in the play-in? That is certainly possible. And in a 1-game series, what we just saw with the play-in tournament is that size matters a lot. Shooting variance matters a lot. Shooting talent matters a lot. I don't think you want to go up in a 1-game series against a 1-game do or die in the 9-10 matchup against Nick Nurse and Joel Embiid potentially being healthy and probably injuring half your roster in the process. So I don't think that's a favorable matchup. I don't think the Atlanta Hawks are necessarily a favorable matchup in a play-in setting either. Can a healthy Raptors team beat the Atlanta Hawks? Possibly, but it would be, Ice Trey, Trey Young, super clutch. The Indiana Pacers are a team that I think they are smaller than the Raptors in general and across the board. If they're healthy, I think they're the more talented team right now, especially if Tyrese Halliburton can catch up, especially if they can get some of their defenders back. But I think it's a toss-up. Then you look at the next equation, which is, okay, now you get out of the play-in. Who you got? Smack dab, you got Two teams that you have absolutely zero chance against. I don't care how well Scottie plays. You're not beating Boston. You're not beating Cleveland. Could you get meaningful reps, though? There's nothing meaningful about being blown out by 30 every game and having no chance. There is something, however, meaningful in what the Raptors did with the Philadelphia 76ers in the playoffs a few years ago, where, you push it to 6 games, Scottie gets better, but Scottie was injured, so you kind of lose that. Half those players, most of those players are gone. Did the Chris Boucher reps help him? I don't know. So I think that the broader discussion isn't really about what's Brooklyn going to do. It matters, but not that much. I don't care that you can be better than Brooklyn. Brooklyn's going to tear it down. They're going to trade away Cam Johnson, possibly even trade away Cam Thomas. I don't think that's the discussion. I don't think it matters, what Washington's doing. You're not going to catch them. They have, I think, 3 or 4 wins right now. You're not going to catch them. They might finish the season with 8 wins. You already have 8 wins. So leave that out of the equation. You're not catching Washington. You're probably going to be in the same realm of situation as Chicago is in, which is how healthy are you? Do they find a taker for Zach LaVine? And then there's the other, element of this, which is business. Raptors ticket sales are down. How much do you think MLSE values moving up a couple of spots versus chasing the gate on, hey, this game is for play-in contention over in April? I mean, people have checked out of this team. I'm telling you from the numbers. I'm looking at podcasts. Hello and welcome, new podcast by William Liu, Alex Wong, supported by, crazy amounts of dollars and media members and all that stuff. They've had everybody on. They've had Jack Armstrong on. They've had Matt Devlin on. They have Keeks on. They have all these people on, and I'm monitoring it. I'm seeing it. It's a new podcast in the Raptor space with some familiar faces. Look at their numbers. Shit's down, bro. The numbers are down across the board. Fan interest is down. And so it matters, it matters. And someone, Recruiter Dude in our last live, he brought up this conversation about, okay, at what point do you start to sustain some ramifications for being this bad? At what point does the locker room start to get tainted? At what point do the young guys start to get demoralized? And I hear all of that. But I think right now, what most matters to me is the asset base and asset value of the players on your team. And that asset value is partially reality and partially perception. Hear me out. Scottie Barnes right now is playing like an all-star, but he hasn't been healthy and he's on a terrible team, so nobody's talking about it. Cade Cunningham, on the other hand, who is playing marginally worse than Scottie, is being talked about as an all-star because he's on a slightly better team. He's been slightly healthier. And so that's the gap. You either have an all-star who's being talked about as an all-star or you don't, right? It's the same thing with someone like Alperen Sengun. Alperen Sengun is in the midst of a terrible shooting season, but he's the best offensive player on the second best team in the West right now, and he's getting a boost, like a supplemental boost on his value around the league. Now, you're not looking to trade Scottie. The Pistons aren't looking to trade Cade. And the Rockets probably are not looking to trade Alperen Sengun, although they could. But what about the players you are looking to trade? What about those players? Because let me tell you something. It's been a very interesting process playing NBA 2K25 and doing the Dynasty mode because you realize a few things very quickly. Number one, you realize there aren't a lot of trades to be made. Man, I dangled Jakob Poeltl for weeks. Nothing came back. It was just crickets. Trying to get a first-round pick for Bruce Brown, be lucky to take on a shit contract. The trade that just kept coming back over and over was Kevin Huerter and a second-round pick. Is that really moving the needle for me? Duplicating Kevin Huerter on a team with Jamison Battle, Grady Dick, and Jacoby Walter and losing out on Bruce Brown? Like, I'm not even sure Bruce Brown's a better player, but so it's slim pickings. It's slim pickings. But look at what the Nets have done for Cameron Johnson's value. Look at what the Nets have done for Nick Claxton's value. Look at what the Nets did with Dennis Schroeder's value. And I think I was about to say New Jersey Nets. Shoot, my childhood. The Brooklyn Nets are a really good example of what winning does to your asset base, what performing well does to your asset base, because obviously you're winning for a reason. Players are playing well. It's interesting, though, that the Raptors are finding a way to play well and lose regardless. Once again, they have won more quarters. They've been in most of these games. So there's still, you can understand there is a very strong conscious base of preserving value of players. They're not just going to shut down Jakob Poeltl because he's a value. He's a contract on your books, and you don't know when someone's going to call for him. You don't want to play a player like Bruce Brown before he's ready because that's going to tank his value. What about the other guys on this team that have some value, which is your young players? This is where we need to talk about asset farming and asset base. One of the things that kept coming up in NBA 2K25 was the Raptors kept ending up with like the 8th or 9th pick, and I wanted to move up to like the 5th pick or the 4th pick to get a player that I was really interested in. And whenever I would try to do that, the trade that always came back was, okay, we want Jonathan Mobo. Now, I didn't pull the trigger on any of those trades because I love Jonathan Mobo, but you understand what I mean. When it comes down to it, it doesn't matter how you get the 4th overall pick or the 5th overall pick. It doesn't matter how you build a championship roster. There are 100 different ways to do it. You can draft well, you can trade well, you can luck out, and Shaquille O'Neal just comes to your city and says, I want to leave Orlando and I want to be in LA, and here's 3 rings. You can luck out and trade for a disgruntled star like Kawhi Leonard. But you know how you trade for Kawhi Leonard? You had the assets to do so. You know how you trade for potentially a disgruntled star in the future? You must keep the asset base high. You know who's not treating their asset base as anything of consequence? The Washington Wizards. Everything is all tank or nothing. And what's going to happen when the Washington Wizards finish with the worst record in the league and end up picking 5th, and that player ends up being a bust, is not only have you taken Kyle Kuzma and Jordan Poole, put them into a situation where they play rec league basketball, and therefore no team really wants them or values them properly, but you've also created an absolutely disastrous culture for those players to even grow. And so it is hard to imagine the different versions of Bilal Coulibaly or Alex Sarr or Bub Carrington and what these players might have been, could have been, should have been had they been in a different situation. But I certainly don't think we're going to see the best of Bilal Coulibaly in Washington. And I'm pretty convinced we're going to see the best version of most of these young players that the Raptors have on the Toronto Raptors. So how do you weigh out that on one side, weigh out the trade value of Jakob Poeltl on one side, RJ Barrett on one side, and then on the other hand, weigh out the gap between the 4th overall pick and the 7th overall pick? Is it worth it? What's it worth? Now, the Toronto Raptors, to their credit, are already doing a lot of asset rehab. And I want to talk about one of those players that's been a bit of a polarizing topic around the Raptors land, which is RJ Barrett. This conversation always gets a little bit controversial. And I want to address my biases when it comes to RJ. I love defense. I realize this about myself, that I tend to undervalue the hell out of any player who does not play good defense. It's probably why I'm so much higher on Cooper Flagg than probably most people in the world. It's why I was high on Bilal Coulibaly. It's probably why I rate Amen Thompson where I do. It's why I was so high on Dyson Daniels. I have a weird equation in my head in which defense is like 45%. Sorry. Like defense is 45% of the equation, offense is 55% of the equation. Whereas I think most fans, it's more like a 75-25 split. And when defense is 55% of the equation, you end up valuing certain players more than others. OG Anunoby, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Jalen Williams. Suddenly, when you start stacking those guys against guys like Trae Young, you start to lose the value of Trae Young because you see a defensive pylon, whereas another team might see an offensive engine. This didn't hold true necessarily. Like Jokic is one of my favorite players. He's not no one's definition of a great defender. So there is that element of it, right? HC saying Penn got idea of this topic from Mars on PC. Huh? Which one? No, I don't think I did. So, okay, let's talk about RJ. How good has RJ been? Okay. I think I'm underrating RJ Barrett. I had a strong cathartic moment yesterday. It's almost like the Milwaukee Bucks winning that NBA Cup blew my brain open into questioning everything I know about basketball, because I really thought that the OKC Thunder were going to stomp them. And sometimes an event like that happens where you have to question yourself and you start to think, am I wrong about certain things? Probably. I've been pushed very hard on the Cade Cunningham stuff, very hard. For years, I have held up firm that Cade Cunningham is a bust and that I do not value his style of basketball because he is super high turnover and he's not a good defender. Well, he's been a better defender this year, and he is borderline playing like an all-star, and I have to give Cade his flowers, right? Cade's been good. Yeah, I don't think he's Scottie good. I don't think he's Franz good. I don't think he's Şengün good. But in terms of the 2021 redraft, I used to say, I don't think Cade would go top 8, top 9. I used to say I would put Trey Murphy over him. I used to say I would put Jalen Suggs over him. I would not put Jalen Suggs or Trey Murphy over Cade Cunningham. So I'm evolving. I'm adjusting. I'm learning more, and every day I learn more about the game. I have to start to value certain things. RJ Barrett. This is where we come to RJ Barrett. RJ Barrett is the absolute poster child for things I don't care about on the basketball court, right? Low efficiency offense. Not a fan. A lack of dynamicism in his basketball game. He's very one directional. He goes left a lot. He drives to the rim a lot. A little bit like a mini Giannis. Very, very ineffective version of that. But there's some elements of just how much pressure he puts on the opposing defense. He's certainly not open. I'll tell you that. I watched a lot of RJ possessions today, and just watching his makes, he's certainly not open. He's certainly putting pressure on the rim. And whether or not he's converting at a level that is satisfactory for a person who generates his level of usage, he's still doing a pretty decent job. RJ Barrett, in terms of hybrid lineups and blending into different roles and, participating over the last couple of games, man, his defense has been better the last couple of games. It's been better, and it's been better than it was last year, right? And here's the point. Are you paying RJ Barrett? What did you pay for RJ Barrett? Now, this is a bigger question to be had. What did you pay for RJ Barrett? You paid jack shit. You paid, basically, the swap was Emmanuel Quickley and a second round pick for OG Anunoby. You took on RJ Barrett to fill out contracts, and you gave up Malachi Flynn and Precious Achiuwa. Man, RJ Barrett is so much better than those guys. So I'm inclined to say that the trade that looked like an A+ is looking like an A++, especially if Emmanuel Quickley comes back and he is as good as I think he's going to be, because I think he's a really fantastic young player who works very hard and provides a lot of value in the NBA context, especially with the way that we're going today and teams needing dynamic shooters. The other thing that I think I noticed when I was watching OKC, not to dance around the subjects too much, is how much OKC could use an RJ Barrett. Tough conversation to be had, because Lou Dort is everything I value in a basketball player. He's efficient, he's selfless, he's positionally versatile, and he's a really, really goddamn good defender. Isaiah Joe is everything I value in a basketball player. He's efficient, his game is simple, it is replicable, it puts a lot of space on the court for your downhill drivers. He's a perfect complementary piece. Cason Wallace is a player that I very much value. It seems the OKC Thunder have just stacked up player on player on player on player that I value. They have a lot of stretch bigs. I'm a huge Isaiah Hartenstein fan. I was pushing for the Raptors to sign him in free agency a couple of years ago before he went to the Knicks. I loved him for the LA Clippers when he was a backup big to Vita Zubac. I thought Isaiah Hartenstein was, sub all-star level impact. I don't mean like an all-star, but I thought he was flashing sub all-star level impact off the bench. And I thought the Knicks got a criminally, cheap deal on him. And now I think he's being more fairly paid at $27 million. Now, what we saw with OKC yesterday, though, was that no one was really able to punish the closeout. So it's one thing to be run off the line, like you can run Cason Wallace off the line because he's a good three-point shooter. You try to run Lou Dort off the line because he's a standstill shooter and he takes a lot of threes and he's making them at a pretty decent, level. You try to run him off the line, and what does he do? Does he finish well? Can he get to the paint? Can he make the pass out? Well, now we're talking about more dynamic players. Even Jalen Williams did not look very good, although I think Jalen Williams has much more of a wiggle and in between game. But you start looking at guys that the Raptors have, and they're not very one dimensional at all, are they? The way they are developing them, Jakob Poeltl is more than capable of being a 3-level scorer going forward. When you look at Grady Dick, how many times now people want to stress and focus on Grady's makes and misses from three. I genuinely don't fucking care. I think him and Jacoby shooting cold from three is uh, the force is broken. You know, like there's a glitch in the matrix. Nobody cares about this. It doesn't matter because they're good shooters. They're gonna make shots eventually when their legs are not so goddamn tired from playing this scramble everything MIG defense. But what I think is that longer term, what you are developing with these guys is actually complete basketball players. And it's what you need when you talk about stars. What are stars? They're the best versions of the complete basketball players. They're the most efficient version of complete basketball players. Complete basketball players can score on 3 levels. Complete basketball players can go both ways. Complete basketball players can compete defensively and offensively. Complete basketball players can play on the ball, off the ball. Complete basketball players can attack a closeout. When you run off the line from three, they can pull up from mid-range. When you close down the mid-range, they can get to the range. They can get to the rim. They can get to the line. They can attack 2 defenders. They can make a pass out of that. You need to develop complete basketball players. And my issue is I am so honed in on this 3-and-D archetype that I need to change my tune. I need to change my view because the reality of the situation is, while at the surface, what a Herb Jones or an OG Anunoby can do, you know, in terms of positional versatility and matching up with stars and disrupting rhythm and things like that, it's so much more valuable what a guy like Grady can do in theory. I'm not saying Grady's better than those guys. He's certainly not, because he's not efficient enough yet at the things that he does. But when you start to really scale up percentages of a 20, 21-year-old movement shooter trying to break in as a 3-level scorer and potentially a sub all-star type of player, when you look at, you know, I mean, shoot, 2 of my favorite rookies in the NBA this year have a -6 box plus minus in Jamal Shead and Jakob Poeltl. Neither one of these dudes is breaking any analytics model. They're costing you wins. I guarantee you they both have negative win shares. They're both negative offensive box plus minus, negative defensive box plus minus. Everything is negative, man. Everything is negative with these two. But I love them. I love them because they project into complete basketball players. When you look at Jamal Shead, I watched so much tape of Jamal Shead over the last few years. Over the last few months since we've gotten him from Houston. And there was one play that I looked at today where he gets run off when he gets run off the 3-point line, and he steps in for this midi pull up with the game on the line, and he hits it. And you see plays like this with Jamal Shead. You see disruptive, you know, elements defensively, even when he's undersized and going up against a 6'2" guard. And you're like, man, this could work. You know, the best version of this is a really complete basketball player, right? When I look at Ulrich, now so raw, right? If you put him in the NBA right now, deer in the headlights, right? But when you see the short roll passing and you see the transition play and you see the touch around the rim and you start to see the shot blocking, the switchability, you're like, God damn it. He may not be very good at anything right now, but God damn it, he is a very complete basketball player in terms of projection. You could really mold him into a complete one. Jonathan Mobo, right? People want him to be a rim running straight, you know, big, but he is so positionally versatile, but he's also got all these fantastic ball skills that allow him to grab an offensive rebound and kick out to a shooter right into their pocket, ball skills that allow him to handle the ball on a transition break, ball skills that will eventually allow him to become a great screen and roller. I mean, this guy's got broad shoulders. Wait till he fills out. He is not strong right now. When he gets strong, it's going to be over. Now, I listened to a podcast recently, and I can't remember which it was because some of these Raptors podcasts do run together. But they were talking about the Raptors 905. Oh yeah. Now we're giving shout outs to other Raptors content creators. I ended up checking out a Chev video, NBA Chev. All right. So we're not ducking from anything. I've not been a big fan of NBA Chev, but decided to, you know, once every month, once every 2 months, I just decide to look him up and see what he's saying, because his followers happen to be a lot of our followers. A lot of you listen to that dude, and I have not had kind things to say about him, but one of the things he was talking about was this ain't the Raptors bench mob. This ain't Fred, Pascal, OG, Norm. This ain't those guys, right? Jakob. I mean, think about how much money they made. He referenced that, they've made over $1 billion, combined in terms of salary. Those guys, that there should be a documentary about them and all that stuff, right? I'm gonna tell you something. It's very difficult to think about the past and the present in the same light. It's so difficult. But I'm going to tell you something right now that might shock you. I think Jonathan Mobo is a better rookie than Pascal Siakam. I really do. And while I do agree that Fred VanVleet was a better rookie than Jamal Shed, I certainly think that. I think as it pertains to becoming a complete basketball player, the best version of Jamal Shed is better than the best version of Fred VanVleet. I don't think that best version necessarily is going to come true. Fred VanVleet is complete outlier of outliers when it comes to undersized guards. But when you just look at the box plus minus, you're like, damn, Fred is clearing this guy. He is so much better. Yeah, well, Fred is also on a much, much better team. Much better team. That's where numbers don't tell the full story. You know what number does tell the full story for me, though? 2-point percentage being 10% higher for Jamal Shed. He's just better around the rim. Fred VanVleet has been notoriously inefficient through his whole life. He simply lacks the burst. He lacks that burst. And I also think Jamal's a much better passer. So yeah, the numbers aren't looking right because the shot isn't as good. Fred came out as a sniper. The shooting is what changes everything. You realize that? Fred VanVleet can shoot. So teams have to give him space on the drive. So Fred VanVleet can penetrate. Once he can shoot, he can create gaps. Jamal Shed can't shoot. The fact that he can't shoot and that he's not being respected as a shooter, and the fact that he's still been as effective as he's been, is a miracle, given the lack of spacing that is around him, the lack of talent that's around him. Now, I do think that the broader perspective here is that the Raptors have 5 very, very good rookies. And I don't know if y'all notice this, but I have made it my mission to make sure the whole world knows about these rookies. I say this with almost tears in my eyes, and I'm not trying to be over dramatic about this, but I love this rookie class. There's so many stories here that were really they would twist on your heart when you got to understand Jamal Shed's story, or Ulrich's story, or Jonathan Mobo's story. These are all underdogs. These are all people who have been overlooked. Oh, Ulrich is playing in Senegal. Fuck that guy. So raw. Took a chance, right? Jamal Shed, winningest player in college basketball, had a recent post about Jamal Shed. I'm gonna share it with y'all. I can't play it because it's gonna get demonetized. But look at this shit, yo. This post went crazy. Do you realize that over just the last, over just the last 24 hours, by the way, yeah, this post right here. Look at the reach on this. Look at the posts. Look at the reposts. Do you know where these reposts are coming from? These reposts are coming from, we got 81 reposts, 646 likes, 19 comments. And you know what they're all saying? You know what they're all saying? I love this guy. They're all Houston Cougars fans and people who've been rooting for this guy their whole life. You don't realize how many people have been rooting for this kid to succeed. And it reminded me of Alex Caruso, Lou Dort, Fred VanVleet, all the underlooked or overlooked, underrated guys. The story that was shared on yesterday's broadcast about Alex Caruso was a touching one, where Mark Daigneault had coached the Oklahoma City Thunder G League team and had Alex Caruso on it, and had remembered Alex Caruso from a time when he was facing Alex Caruso's team in college when he was coaching there. And he'd remembered this kid checking in, and it was a 40-point blowout, and Alex Caruso was on the losing team. And he was just going like it was a tie game. And that's when he knew that this is a kid that he wanted to watch and he wanted to follow. This is what you have to hone in on. This part of it, the what is the ticker? I've been notoriously, on the record for years saying I don't think most NBA basketball players give a shit about basketball. I really don't even think they care. There's a lot of people where it's check in, check out. What's my next contract? What's my next flight? Okay, cool. I'll show up. I'll be there. I can't tell you how annoyed I would be trying to follow a team which employed the likes of a Zion Williamson or a DeAndre Ayton. Sure, talented. I don't care. But you don't care. I don't care. It's hard to care about people who don't care. I'm a person who always leads from the heart. And I'm always going to say this team is easy to root for because they all fucking care. Whether you want to have an issue with RJ Barrett's splits, I'll never doubt whether RJ Barrett cares about basketball, man. RJ Barrett cares about basketball so much. This guy takes losses hard. You can tell. I've made a bit of a history of myself as a Raptors podcaster, breaking down the body language of the Fred VanVleets and the Dennis Schroeders of the world. That doesn't just swing one way. I don't just see bad body language. I also see good body language. I also know when a player cares. I can sense it from the bench. I know when a player is plugged in. I've been watching basketball my whole life. It's like 25, 28 years now, 28 plus years of seriously honing in on the game. Trust me, when a team is connected. When a player is connected to their teammates. When there's a player that their teammates just do not like them. I've noticed it myself playing the game, So whether you have an issue with Jamal Shedd's shooting splits or RJ Barrett's shooting splits or Jakob Poeltl, none of these people are just plug and play professionals. None of these people are just coming in, clock out. They all care. And so when people care, I think you have to approach that from the human element too. So I end where I started and I start where I ended, and it's always the same, and it's a big circle. And the circle is you root for the team, win, loss, or draw. I haven't been there before with this team in a long time, but I certainly was not the loudest critic of Kyle Lowry when he was having his playoff failures, or DeMar DeRozan, because those people cared about their teammates. That mattered to me. And they cared about the game, and that matters to me. And they cared about winning, and that matters to me. And they were doing everything they could to win. Whether they were good enough or bad enough to beat LeBron was another equation. But in the end, you root for the team because they're doing the right stuff. And I think the Raptors are doing the right stuff. And as I said, my goal this season, I walked into this season when I saw this team in Summer League, I saw these rookies, I started looking into them. I'm like, man, who am I most excited about? I think someone asked me that question once in the chat. Like, which rookie are you most excited about? I had to pause because I was thinking it could be one of four names. And then, damn, Jamison Battle came on the scene. And I'm like, damn, it might be one of five names. I'm excited about all of them. And through this channel, through various breakdowns and videos, through X on Twitter, etc., I believe that we have led the coverage on this Raptors rookie class, from video essays and video breakdowns on Jakob Poeltl, from viral posts about Jamal Shead and Ulrich and interviewing Ulrich's trainer. We have done, I think, as a community, more to support this rookie class. And believe me, they see it, they appreciate it, and they will remember it going forward. And I'm not doing it for nothing. It's because I really do believe that these guys are going to end up among the stars. I think they're going to be a really great thing. And years from now, I don't think you'll be saying, oh, the bench bomb, they couldn't live up to that. I think all of these guys have a chance to be really solid professionals. What more they can be, trust me, nobody saw Pascal Siakam All-NBA after his rookie season. Nobody. If they're telling you they did, they're lying or they're stupid. Nobody did. Nobody saw Freddie All-Star after his rookie season. What you knew at that moment was they had a chance, that they were competitive, that they could be rotation players. You know what the Portland Trailblazers don't know right now? Whether Scoot Henderson can be a rotation player in the NBA. That's what they don't know right now. And you know what? That's not something I don't know about the Toronto Raptors rookie class. I think they can all, with the exception of Ulrich, who hasn't proven it yet, but I believe he will get there because of his insane processing and youth and work ethic and just him being a sponge. But he's probably the more outside shot, but also a very, very exciting outside shot if you've ever seen one. But when you look at this whole picture and you see like, oh man, how good would it be to add a Cooper Flagg or, yeah, it would be great. It would be great. I watch Cooper every single, game, and I'm just like, yo, this would be amazing. But don't lose the forest from the trees. You got a lot of young players on this team that are very much worth believing in. And I think RJ Barrett is one of them. I really do. I'm coming around. I'm coming around to RJ Barrett. His shooting splits may not be great, but he has been operating some of the worst spacing ever. And it's one thing that I realized with Cade Cunningham. And I think, Cade has become a very interesting thought experiment for me in terms of understanding RJ because I've compared them a lot, and I think there's elements of Cade's game that are better. There's elements of RJ's game that are better, but I relatively walked into the season thinking of them as similar players. And one of the things that I realized is that as the players around Cade have gotten better and better, that he has looked better and better. And what he is able to do what he's not able to do with the worst spacing, we are now seeing him able to do with the increased spacing, where to say his turnovers are slightly down. Okay. Is he an elite court processor? Is he Magic Johnson, Scottie Barnes? No, he's not Luka, but he's better than I thought he would be. The finishing percentages, all the gifts, they're starting to come out, right? I apologize. Why do I have an alarm going off at 10 p.m.? What kind of weirdo lifestyle am I leading that I got an alarm going on at 10 p.m.? I'll guarantee you that alarm was supposed to go off at 10 a.m. tomorrow. My bad. I'm on the panel tomorrow. So anyone wanting to tune in, we're going to be talking a lot of Raptors tomorrow on the panel. So I definitely suspect y'all should check. I would advise y'all to check in on the panel. There's, we're talking, I think the topic is players having breakout seasons and players, improving. And I have been asked to talk about 3 or 4 players. And, anytime speaking to an American audience, it's going to be Raptors talk. So y'all will definitely hear me talking about RJ Barrett in a much more positive light than I have. And yeah, so to complete my thought here, I think when you consider what RJ is able to do now as a Toronto Raptor, that he was not. 705 Machine Gun says, Cade is a much better player than RJ and always was. He was just on a bad team his whole career. Rob, that SGA take went viral on the panel. Uh-oh, that sucks. That sucks. Rob, were you a fan of Fred prior to Scottie joining the Raps? Yes. Yes, I was. Super chat here from James Barron. Thanks, Rob. Keep up the great content. Give us Cason Wallace. Give us Cason Wallace. I am not Sam Presti. I cannot give you Cason Wallace. Is Dylan Harper close to Flagg for you? No, not really. I think of them in different tiers. I know some people won't, and I could be wrong. I certainly could be wrong. Okay, so to get back to this, Cade is a much better player than RJ and always was. He's just on a bad team his whole career. Okay. So Cade's 23. RJ is 24. There's about a 2-year gap between them, year and a half. Brian Macon saying, yes, Dylan Harper special. I hear you. Shout outs to Brian, Scotty's trainer. I hear you. There's a, when you and I have talked about certain players, I think there's always a bias that comes in on both sides. I think you like players with very dynamic skills, which is probably why you definitely think Dylan Harper is super special. I like players who close down space, which is why I think Cooper Flagg is very special defensively. I also really appreciate the fact that a 17-year-old freshman is doing this, for a blue blood against a pretty stacked schedule. So I'm going to say, I think athletically, I'll take the bigger playmaker 10 times out of 10, but Dylan's no slouch. I wonder, so there's one thing that scares me about Dylan, and that's his shot. He plays defense. Dylan plays defense. I hear you. Dylan Harper plays defense. Cooper Flagg is defense. Cooper Flagg is basically like going to win Defensive Player of the Year at some point. So if we're talking straight if we're talking straight up like upside, I could see Dillon being the better offensive player for sure if the shot isn't an issue. And the shot being an issue is basically coming down to the form and him not being the greatest vertical athlete. Like I think he's shifty as hell. I don't know. I mean, I've seen a lot of players overcome their lack of burst, like SGA, right? Flexibility. He's able to, process the game at such an elite level. I think Dylan Harper has a lot of that. No, I don't think Cooper's a bad shooter, man. I don't think Cooper's a bad shooter at all. I think he's going to be fine. I think maybe he'll max out at like 37, 38%, but that dude works really hard. And he's making them at a pretty decent clip. All right. So better defensively than Wemby. No, he's not better than Wemby, but you'll assume that at some point, like when I say defensive player of the year, maybe I'm not necessarily thinking about like necessarily winning the award, but that level of impact, I'm thinking past level, past defensive player of the year, like the Dikembes, the Ben Wallaces, etc. You know, is Ace Bailey like Jabari Smith or Jabari Parker? I'm assuming you mean Jabari Smith. I think the thing that scares me about Ace is he doesn't get anything easy and everything is hard, and he doesn't get a lot of separation, and his game doesn't necessarily do well. But the thing that I will caution is that big wings and big playmakers in general, and I think he has a little bit more playmaking to his game than he's necessarily shown at Rutgers. I think he has some solid. I think he has a chance to be like a really good professional basketball player. I feel like Kaman can be a perennial all defensive player. Super far away from that right now, man. But do you like Demon? I think he's all right. I was never super duper duper high on him. If y'all remember just so we're clear, this whole like Dylan Harper shit that's been coming around like the last week and a half, we were ahead of it. So just to be clear, when everyone was pushing Ace over Dylan Harper, I said, wait, not so fast. I do value big playmakers. That's why I'm a huge Scottie Barnes fan. But so when we did that two-man thing, when we did the top 10 draft prospects, y'all remember we had Cooper number 1 and Dylan number 2. Don't forget. Would you trade RJ for Herb Jones? It's closer than I think. Herb is 2 years older. He is a lot cheaper. It's close. It's really close. And that's not something I was willing to say coming into this year, but it's close. Would you rather Shed be backup point guard instead of Mitchell? I'm cool. I'm cool with either or. I really don't. I'm off my Davion, slander train. I really just don't care. I think it's not productive. It's not a productive use of my time as a podcaster to be talking about Davion Mitchell. Like if he becomes an asset worth salvaging for the Raptors, and again, what I talked about earlier with asset farming and asset salvaging, and the Raptors are like a dumpster yard for a lot of written off players, and you want to develop them, but make no mistake about it, when you start honing in your development talents, and this is a talent. Developing basketball players is a talent the Raptors have in spades. They have opportunity, they have playing time, they have the G League, and they have an actual talent with Darko and Jama and Evo and these guys. So you want to take that talent that you have and you want to put it to good use. And putting it to good use would be pouring an entire 4 years into Cooper Flagg or Dylan Harper or Kaman Malawach. Now, you can do everything now, let me clarify. You could do everything right in the whole world with Jamal Shed, and you could do almost everything wrong with Dylan Harper, and there's probably still going to be a gap in talent. But if you do everything right with Dylan Harper, you're talking about an all-star, like a 12-time all-star. If you do everything right with Cooper Flagg, you're talking about, a top 5 MVP finish for like the next 8 years. You're talking about him and Scottie becoming one of the most dynamic, most difficult to score on duos, best two-way duo in the NBA, right? And I also think their personalities would fit like perfectly. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know where I'm at in terms of that, but what I do know is the Raptors assets, like how I judge this season is not as simple as do you get a top 5 pick? How I judge this season is what assets did you walk in with? What assets do you walk out with at season close, right? The sum total of all the trades, the Bruce Brown potential trade, the does Jakob Poeltl get moved or not? Does Kelly get moved or not? All these questions that need to be asked. How much development has gone into it? How many players, tried out things that made them better? The classic Jeremy Sohan example from last year where he's running point. People are losing their minds, but this year he's coming out and he's been a much better player. And you start to look at that. The other thing is the asset base of the play, the actual assets that you have on your books. The Pacers pick, right? That is offering something of actual value right now because the Pacers do not look like a dynasty in the making with Pascal Siakam and Tyrese Halliburton, with potentially Miles Turner approaching unrestricted free agency. If they lose Miles Turner, I don't think Jarris Walker is ready to step into that role. And again, Miles is not a bad defender. He's not a great defender. He's a guy. He's a guy at this point, but he's a guy that you so sorely need for that offense. And he's not a guy that you can replace very easily in the NBA because a stretch big who can actually block shots at a competent rate, they don't grow on trees. So you start to look at that and you're like, man, that 2026 Pacers pick could be very appetizing. And because it is top 4 protected and not top 10 protected, top 8 protected, it's not like the Pacers can just tank and cost you the pick. It would be impossible with Tyrese Halliburton for them to tank. So one way or another, unless they get very lucky in the lottery, you're probably going to get that pick. Now, it would be a very blue ball situation if you do end up in a situation where they end up with the 7th or 8th best odds and you think you're going to get a lottery pick and then they finish top 2 in the draft. Or shit, if they get, oh my God, I just thought about it. What if the Pacers are really terrible next year? Here's something to keep you up at night. What if the Pacers are really, really bad next year? They end up with the 7th or 8th worst record after some sort of slew of injuries and a decline for Pascal Siakam, and everyone's like, "Oh my God, we're gonna get a top 5, top 6, a top 8 pick in the draft," and then they end up winning the draft and keeping their pick and drafting AJ DeBonso. Oh my God, that would suck. Now you think like, man, I wish that pick wasn't protected. But alas, this is why picks are protected. Okay. So, yeah. But regardless, before that pick even conveys or whatever it conveys into, that's the point at which you're going to have to really, really think about, what you got, what you can move. And what you can move is only going to be as appetizing as what you've created. And what you've created, ideally, is a bunch of really portable, complete basketball players, right? So the winning may not help very much, but the skill development will. And at some point, when the winning catches up to the skill development, you're going to look at these players very differently, and so will the rest of the league. Which way am I rooting for? I'm rooting for the Raptors to do the right thing, man. I am. But at the same time, you understand that this comes down to relationships. You're not going to break your relationship with Scottie Barnes and the entire team and just be like, okay, we really, really value Dylan Harper and Cooper Flagg, so we're going to ask you guys to sit out games that you're perfectly healthy to play. Scottie has a huge thing on the line, which is all NBA. Now, you may or may not necessarily think he's going to make it. I'm going to tell you right now, he's playing very much on par with all NBA. He's playing about as good a season as Pascal Siakam played when he made all NBA. The difference was Pascal was on a winning team. So Scottie can be on a winning team. He's going to make all NBA. With the injuries, that you've already had at his position, not that all NBA is all positionless, but you take Paolo out of all NBA contention because of the injury. You take Franz out of all NBA contention because of the injury. You take Joel Embiid out of all NBA contention because of the injury. Suddenly, you're like, shoot, it's a wide open field. It's wide open. And if Scottie puts together a really solid 2/3 of a season at this point and he's healthy and the Raptors make the playoffs, yeah, I think he's going to make all NBA. At which point, that's $45 million. That's a really strong incentive. That's a really strong incentive to drive winning. Now, I don't think, with Jakob Poeltl out, I don't think the Raptors going to have an easy time facing off against Houston or New York. With Jakob Poeltl in, I think you could split that game. I think you could split those two. You could possibly win against Houston and lose against New York, or lose against Houston and win in New York. I don't know. One of those two situations, you certainly could. If Yak and IQ come back for Christmas, like, you could certainly put together a little bit of a win. But I'm going to reiterate, I do think that over that stretch that I outlined before, I do think you're going to have to win at least 8 games. You cannot go 5-13 over the next 18 and then expect that at 12-30, 12-32, I think, 12-30, that you're going to be saving your season, because it's really hard to get that much of on an uphill climb. And once you pick that direction, you're married to that direction. So you're like, oh man, we have an easy schedule, and the last month is last month of the season, and then boom, Jakob Poeltl's out, and it's not easy anymore. You cannot leave it up to the injury gods. I think that the final point of this will be, when I said the human element of it, it is very important for the next 10 to 12 months of this team, as you are laying the seeds and the growth and the potential, rising for your next championship run and your next playoff run, that you keep guys connected and you keep the trust. Okay. If everything you're preaching is winning, MIG, development, you can't introduce topics that have nothing to do with that and become inconsistent and then lose the locker room. You cannot suddenly start being like, okay, I know this guy's healthy, that guy's healthy, but we're not going to play Jakob Poeltl. We know Jakob Poeltl is perfectly healthy, but we know you guys need the center, but we're not going to play Jakob Poeltl. You can't do that. That's going to be really, really difficult to swallow. And I think you break trust with these guys. And it's important to have trust with these guys so that they do not become tainted by the business of the NBA, because that's one of the most depressing things when you're on a basketball team. Think about it from your perspective. If you ever played hoops, if you ever played basketball, I think my most frustrating shit as a basketball player, I remember this one time I was playing basketball. I think I was grade 7 or grade 8. And I was on the same team as the coach's son. And this dude was like at least 2 inches bigger than me. He was running point, and I did not understand why I had to play off ball to accommodate him. But he was the coach's son. So that kind of pissed me off. And I think I brought that energy into the game way too often. Like, I would just be like, I know that this dude is going to get every touch that should be mine. And it doesn't connect well with you, right? So when you start looking at that from the perspective of, what these kids are going through, grinding through pains, injuries, etc., you don't want to lose the motivation to get better. You don't want to lose the motivation to go out and do the right thing. Otherwise, you're going to have blowouts, and it's not going to be very fun for anybody. So you need to keep them close. You need to keep these games competitive. In order to get anything of actual meaning, you need to be able to, connect with your team in the summer and be like, this is what we're pushing towards. It's going to be really hard to push them towards development when it has been clear to them that you have artificially tanked the season, right? So you have to give them a chance to see how good they can be. That has to be there. I think it's on everybody's mind right now. Everybody in the media, everybody on the team is thinking, once we get healthy, how good are we? I think we need a chance to see it. Now, you might say it's too late to see it. I don't care. I want the draft pick, but that's not what the players in the locker room are thinking. So give them a week with Jakob Poeltl and Emmanuel Quickley back, with RJ, with Scottie, with Grady. Give him at least that 5. Yeah, Kelly has been saying that his back is hurting. Give him that. Give them that too. Him, possibly Bruce Brown. Give him a healthy week. Guess what? You got a brutal schedule. So your healthy week is going to come up against some really, really good teams. Now you can actually see it. And now, when you do end up 12-30 and pull the plug, I don't think anyone will be upset. But if you pull the plug prematurely, then you end up where Brooklyn is right now and where Brooklyn was last year. If you remember, the Brooklyn Nets sat their starters against the Milwaukee Bucks after playing their starters on a back-to-back with the Detroit Pistons. And literally, the locker room checked out on the head coach. They had to fire that head coach and bring in a new coach. That's the human element that I don't think the Brooklyn Nets have ever understood, that players are human beings and you must preserve that relationship. I think that's very important. Anyways, I'm going to catch you all later. Thank you so much for tuning in. Nice and even, right around an hour. And once again, James Barron, thank you so much for the super chat. I am such a terrible festival director. I didn't even mention this podcast was brought to you by the Penn Dance Film Festival. Penn Dance is happening February 27th to March 2nd, 2025. Tickets and passes go on sale December 21st, which is in 3 days. You're going to be able to buy your loved one the gift of cinema. And how do I know that Penn Dance is a really goddamn great festival? Easy. I founded it in 2017 and it has been rocking people's worlds. To this day, we get emails from people who attended last year. You want to come meet the Pensar basketball community? There were a ton of Pensar basketball people. I saw Scottie Barnes jerseys at Penn Dance and my heart was full because it's combining the two things that I care about the most. So I hope that y'all will support Penn Dance the way you did last year. And thank you so much. Thank you to our moderators. Clutch Tatum saying free tickets. We could do a couple of free tickets, sure. Yeah, I'm gonna check y'all later. Davion jersey this year for real. What will I do if I see a Davion Mitchell number 45 jersey at Penn Dance? I'll say nice troll. I hope it was worth the $13 that jersey took. Anyways, talk to y'all later. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. Of course, I'm joking. Clearly, I'm not joking. Bye.